Let's talk about Donald Trump. And Krystal, I'm going to need your help with this one just because so much has happened.
Breaking
literally in the last 12 hours.
Yes.
Kind of crazy. All right, so let's start first with a lawsuit filed by President Trump. Let's put this up there on the screen. So here's what happened. President Trump filed this lawsuit to block the Department of Justice from actually reviewing any of the materials that the FBI seized at Mar-a-Lago until a watchdog is appointed. That watchdog would be known as a, quote, special master. And effectively, what a special master does is they're like an independent person who is appointed in a criminal case where there is a concern that material should not be viewed by investigators because it's protected by attorney-client privilege or other factors that weigh against it being used in the prosecution. So they're pointing not only to attorney-client privilege, but as to the other factors being highly classified documents, the Presidential Records Act. There's all sorts of crazy executive power law implications for how exactly this is going to go. It's possible this could actually even work its way up to the Supreme Court because this is in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida in the federal level. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in terms of the Fourth Amendment seizure, Presidential Records Act, executive power, etc.
Yeah,
effectively.
In my opinion, I think it's a reasonable request.
Yeah, I agree.
Used a special master in other, cases with Rudy Giuliani.
Yes.
So this is not like a crazy request from the Trump team.
Yeah, absolutely. So the lawsuit itself, though, kind of sets up the ground for what exactly the Trump strategy is here, which is that they're saying this is a violation, that this is going past the limits of, and actually beyond executive power, mistreatment, and that this is a special case devoid of anything of the previous 3 laws that were cited, and it's not your standard classified information kind of criminal case. So I think that's kind of a good sum up of the lawsuit. The DOJ itself has responded. They're like, we're reviewing what the lawsuit itself says, and that will expect it to be paddled in court. So I think that is, number one, a pretty significant development. But number 2 is actually something that broke last night, which is that, actually, let's throw E3 up there on the screen, please, because Donald Trump actually issued a response himself. Here's what he said. He said that it was a, quote, major motion, and they are strongly asserting his rights and claiming that evidence was planted. He says that they demanded the security cameras be turned off, a request that we rightfully denied. They requested my attorneys from observing, from being taken in the raid, saying no. They took documents covered by attorney-client and executive privilege, which is not allowed. They took my passports, and they even bought a safe cracker and successfully broke into my personal safe. We are now demanding the DOJ be instructed to immediately stop the review of documents illegally seized, and we demand the appointment of a special master. We are further demanding the DOJ be forced to turn over a real, without, quote, plants inventory of my property that was taken and disclosed where that property is now located. We are demanding all items wrongfully taken from my home be immediately returned. So claiming planting and wanting
what I love about this response is it checks all the boxes of
every
his various
box there
responses.
Is. Bad.
He's like, I would have, why didn't you just ask? I would have given you these documents. I don't understand what all the fuss is about.
Right.
And then like 2 sentences later, he's like, these documents are mine and I want them all back. And then, he goes ahead and throws in there that, and actually there aren't even documents, they were just planted by the FBI. So he does all the defenses in one statement here. Classic Trump.
Yeah, but now he can always say that he was vindicated. And then actually what broke even later last night is a report, we don't have an element for this, but about how Trump had more than 300 classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. So this comes from a disclosure that the National Archives found more than 150 sensitive documents when it first got the batch of materials from the former president in January of 2022. Now that is what then spurred the seizure of the rest of the quote-unquote classified documents. Now, in terms of the documents themselves, are they currently classified? I don't know. All we know, and this terminology is important, is, quote, marked as classified. Because, Krystal, that relates to the laws of which this raid was justified as the pretext in the warrant in the first place.
Yes, which don't necessarily require the documents to be actually classified. They just have to be sensitive and, under this Presidential Records Act, et cetera, et cetera. So there were a couple other pieces in this latest, this is a New York Times report, about, they recovered more than 300 individual classified documents during 3 different interactions at Mar-a-Lago in the last 8 months, more than 150 in the boxes that went to the National Archives in January alone. This was kind of interesting to me. They say that the Justice Department, they sought a second round of footage from surveillance cameras at Mar-a-Lago So we already knew that they had subpoenaed some of the surveillance footage, and what was apparently used to help justify the, present evidence to the judge that justified ultimately the raid. Now they're saying they subpoenaed another round that goes through the date of the search. So that's a new piece of information here. They also say that, according to the Times, Trump himself is said to have gone through the boxes in late 2021 after nearly a year of archives officials trying to recover the material. If true, that is significant because it shows his direct sort of involvement, potential intent that you have to prove, that it wasn't just like, oh, carelessness and I forgot I had these documents, these super, super top secret nuclear documents or whatever he has. It shows that he was like directly involved in sorting through and arranging these things. And they said the documents were found in the storage area and in a container in a closet in his office. So they don't say that anything was found in that safe. So that's the latest from the New York Times reporting. Then this other thing happened, which is, I don't really totally understand it, but John Solomon, who actually we used to work with at The Hill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could say a lot about that, but we'll save that for another day.
Yes.
He is now one of Trump's designated representatives to the National Archives. So he is, he's a Trump ally, conduit, et cetera. And he also runs this, right-leaning media outlet. And so he posted a column earlier in the day, yesterday, I think, that was suggesting that the Biden administration, even though they claimed they weren't involved with this thing, they actually were involved in some of the questions over executive privilege. Then they went ahead and released the entire letter. They posted it to this news website that came from the National Archives to Trump. And they posted this like this would be some like sort of bombshell exculpatory thing. But I genuinely don't understand why they think that this makes him look good. Because in fact, what the letter shows is, repeated efforts and inquiries and sort of like a back and forth between the National Archives and Trump's lawyers, where they're trying to get access to these documents. There's an indication of, documents they say were secret and classified all the way up to the highest levels. So it both sort of confirms the reporting that some of the documents he had were at those highest levels of classification, and also confirms that, this raid didn't just come out of nowhere. They've been trying to get control of these documents and get them back. So anyway, that's the latest piece that came out last night.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have no idea whatsoever to make of that. It basically confirms that Trump may be in trouble. As to how this is all going to play out, again, I think, unfortunately, this will just have to drag through the legal system for a long time, given the executive power implications of special master. I mean, like you said, it seems reasonable enough. But more of a delay, then we also are still going to wait on the affidavit as to the extent of how much trouble Trump is in, if he was involved. As, again, you always got to remember, anytime these stories show up in the Times, it's leaked by very, senior DOJ figures. Not a mistake, I think, that it's the exact same people who had all these scoops during Russiagate, during the Mueller investigation. Yeah. So they're trying to shape things as much as possible.
I do think that's important to keep in mind, is when you see reporting, in the Times or with NBC News, they have some, favored DOJ reporters over there as well. This is the information they want to put out there. So definitely keep that in mind as you're reading these stories, and, take it all with a grain of salt that this is sort of like the government's version of events. But it is interesting to know the government's version of events. Absolutely. As it is always very interesting to know Donald Trump's version of events here. So I guess the last thing to mention with regards to this story is the judge who's involved in all of this has asked the Department of Justice to submit their list of suggested redactions to that affidavit, which was used to justify then the search. And you'll recall we covered this yesterday, that the judge has said they want to try to release parts of the affidavit They have gone on to say that, like, you know, ultimately with all the redactions, you may not find it all that useful, but we do want to try to put out there in the public sphere everything that we can. So there's a Thursday deadline for the Department of Justice to submit their suggestions in terms of redactions, which I'm sure will be probably like basically everything. And then I don't know how long, I have no idea how long it will take for the judge to go through those and decide what's going to be released and what's ultimately not going to be released. So that's probably the next piece that we are likely to get. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.